this is kind of cool. For those of us that are real retro rogues that really remember the toys of our childhood, a lot of us know a lot about Mego. Mego was one of those. I remember for me, it was the premier toy for a long time, way before Star Wars. But and of course, a lot of us who are Star Trek fans remember the original Star Trek doll action figures that had the cloth clothes and they came with the cool props. Those were Mego. And then also those of us who are definitely retro rogues will remember they also made the same kind of figures for things like Buck Rogers, Planet of the Apes, all kinds of cool stuff. Well, Mego's been making a bit of a comeback. And this actually comes from the Mego Museum. So those of you who are interested about the Mego toys, you're not terribly familiar. Those of you who are familiar, who want to relive all those cool things from your yesteryear that you remembered having as a kid, they have some amazing galleries on here. They've got some forums for people that collect. This is a really cool resource for those of us that are into those really cool retro toys and action figures, basically for a lot of us of our youth. The thing I want to point out here, though, that was really interesting is that the Mego Corporation has announced a licensing agreement with Tsubara, I'm not pronouncing that correctly, I'm sure, Productions for Ultraman. So basically, they have acquired the rights to do some new toys and some new Mego-style figures actually for Ultraman. So let's see, this article is by, I think it says Palatoy. It's kind of hard to read. But this actually did break today. It says Great Next New York. The Mego Corporation, the original action figure toy company, working with the Licensing Group Limited, announced today that it has acquired the licensing rights to create action figures based on, I don't know how to pronounce that name, so I'm going to skip it, classic Ultraman and anime Ultraman properties. One, a throwback to Mego's past, which they had done Ultraman figures back in the day. The other, a look to their future. Mego is set to unveil its classic and anime 8-inch and 14-inch figures of one of the most prominent tokusatsu superhero genre productions to come out of Japan for collectors of nostalgia and modern action figures alike. Of course, Ultraman debuted in 1966 as a live-action Japanese TV show and has become a beloved science fiction property, it says, the world over. Anyhow, this is a really, really cool article for those of us that love and remember Ultraman. It's kind of cool to see that Ultraman's coming back in this sort of way, kind of, harkening back to sort of like the original action figures. And I just think this is really cool. And I think this is really neat. I actually do have an Ultraman figure I collected back in the day that he actually sits in honor or stands in honor actually with Optimus Prime. He's up there with RoboCop. All my favorite robots are on a shelf back there behind me. You guys can't see them, but anyhow. But I thought this was really cool. What do you think about this, Eric? The fact that and Mego's been making some comebacks. I saw they just announced, and they've been having stuff actually in Walmarts and stuff, for example. And I saw I can't remember if it was a limited edition or if it was just a new release. They're actually doing the classic 1970 Mego style, sort of cloth action figure characters, but they actually had Spock and Kirk in their Wrath of Khan, the red tunics, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, I actually, last time that I was at the Star Trek Las Vegas convention, Mego had a booth there, and they were showing off some of the new Star Trek line and things like that. I've always really liked that style, the Mego style, but I never had any of them as a kid. It was kind of like a little bit before my time. My brother actually had a lot of the original Star Trek Megos, but he had given them away by the time that I could remember, where I was conscious of that kind of stuff. He'd already given them away. There's a lot of interesting Mego figures that have been coming out. I actually have seen them a lot at Target. When I go to Target and go to the toy section there, they have had quite a collection of different Mego figures, and of course, a lot of the Star Trek stuff and things like that. Ultraman specifically, I've always enjoyed the look of Ultraman, but I never really watched the show. I'm familiar with him. I'm familiar with the brand, and I'm familiar with the look, and I think it's a very cool look, so I'll be interested to see what Mego does with it as far as how the figures end up looking. But they do a lot of cool stuff. The new Mego, I guess you would call it, the sort of revamp of it, because they've taken a lot of figures that were never produced, and then they just do it in that classic Mego style. And I think it's really cool. James mentions that my Mego Star Trek figures are probably still stuck up in a tree that had a hole in it, and I stuffed them in for lunch and forgot to get back out. So apparently he lost his Mego figures much in the same way that my brothers were given away.
Yeah, I just remember Mego being like sort of the toy company when I was a kid, because they actually did a lot of the actually small scale plastic superhero figures, some of the earliest ones. And I remember Mego was in an unusual position because, if I remember correctly, they had the license to do the Marvel characters and the DC characters. So it was really an interesting time. And for those people who haven't watched it, on Netflix, there's a really great series called The Toys Who Made Us, and they actually do an episode about Star Trek, and they actually talk to the gentleman who actually founded Mego, and he's a bit of a character of a bit of controversy, and they do talk about that.
He's quite a character. He's got some interesting. I've seen that episode, and yeah, he is quite a character.
So it's definitely worth checking out. But I'm pretty excited about this. I'm a big Ultraman fan, and I think it's really cool that they're doing this. I think it's really kind of neat that Mego is actually doing something. But for those of you there who are interested or curious, I would definitely highly recommend definitely checking out the Mego Museum. It's been around for quite some time here on the internet, and they've got some really cool stuff. For those of us who remember these toys back when we were kids, or those of you who are actually just kind of coming to this stuff new, and you've seen maybe the things in Walmart, and you know it's a retro style thing, but you're not too familiar about it. Some really great, interesting information and resources available here at the Mego Museum to learn all about the company and all the cool toys that they used to make back in the day.
James says that Iron Man had a cloth armor onesie from the superheroes collection.
Yeah, but it's crazy, all the stuff that's on here. I mean, you're talking about Kiss, Flash Gordon, Doctor Who, Happy Days, Greatest American Hero, Dukes of Hazzard. Of course, the original Eagle Force actually came from them. Chips, man, you name it. They did all kinds of crazy stuff. Here's the Pocket Heroes, Planet of the Apes, even television stuff like Donnie and Marie. They friggin' did everything. It was crazy. But no, yeah, definitely. Wow, Love Boat. Ugh, can't believe Space 1999. There you go. So no, yeah, some really cool stuff. Definitely worth checking out.